Alright, dear Bethlemites teachers, the time has come for us to jump into this very important approach, proposed and discussed in the second chapter of the Common European Framework of Reference, the Action-Oriented Approach. These proposals that you're going to see in this video are not only very important, but also very current. The light that we're going to find here, or that we're going to remember, because for some of you, this is not the first time that you hear about this approach, really makes a difference. Alright, let's officially start with the Action-Oriented Approach. The first idea that we need to tell you about this approach is that it is very social. Language acquisition is a social activity. It's a fact. It's a reality. We use language with other human beings in different social contexts. For this reason, we cannot forget about the social dimension of language. In this approach, this social dimension is actually taken to light. We give a lot of relevance to it, and you're going to see why. When we live day by day in a society, we have different responsibilities and many tasks to cope with. This is a key element in the action-oriented approach. Students socially and collaboratively carry out actions to achieve tasks. This is what we do with our teams in real life, with our colleagues, with our family. Communicating is also being able to perform actions with different people, regardless of their cultural background or the language that they have as mother tongue. So, since communication is also a social activity, then students are not only learners, they are social actors. They have tasks to accomplish. They are to achieve these social missions that are close to real life, and they have to take into account the specific circumstances of the field of action in which they perform linguistically. In this sense, with the action-oriented approach, we, teachers and schools, open the classrooms to society. In order to do this, we need to consider two key points. Point number one is that students perform actions in order to achieve a result or a product. This works as an evidence for them to prove that they have worked and learned. But not only that, asking a concrete product from them gives them the sense of achievement, of reaching a goal, and this means more energy for them to invest in their performance. Point number two is that results are not only oral, like the typical PowerPoint presentation. Also, results and products are not only written, like an academic essay. No, results can also be physical, because when students show us their designs, their rehearsals, and their concrete, tangible, and real products, they also show us if they can handle the language that they are learning or not. So here, the invitation comes for us, Bethlемite English teachers in Latin America, to think about different products to ask from students beyond a PowerPoint presentation and an essay. Students also can show their level through parades, school campaigns, theater plays, literature creations, handmade mock-ups, and many more. Now, let's talk about all of the resources that students have. When they come to our lessons, they don't come with an empty mind. They have so many abilities and knowledge. We, teachers, have to use that for the sake of learning. According to this approach, students have three kinds of resources that they have acquired in their family, own experiences, and even in their first scholar years. Students have cognitive, emotional, and volitive resources. What does it mean? Well, students have feelings, emotions, previous knowledge, and personal motivations to learn, or even not to learn, a language. And this information is something that we can gather by implementing different techniques or academic instruments in the classroom to find out what their mind knows, what they can do, and what they want to do or learn. Now, you might be wondering how to narrow this down to specific tasks. Well, for a task to be action-oriented, it has to have a purpose, a social purpose, a reason why students should practice and know what they are learning in English for their real, personal, educational, and professional lives outside the school. It also has to include a variety of situations and contexts that they would need in their real lives. It has to be complex. Let's be careful. Complex doesn't mean impossible or frustrating. Complex means less basic, gradually less and less basic, demanding, something well elaborated. It has to make students use all of their skills and knowledge. Students put into practice everything that they know, everything that they can do, and they work on what they cannot do yet, so that they're eventually able to achieve it. It has to be open-ended. It means that there are so many possibilities to solve the task, so many possible answers. This way, every student can perform the task according to his or her level. For example, introducing ourselves is something that we can do on a basic level, and something that we can also do on a more elaborate level. It is open-ended because high-level students and not so high-level students can do it according to their level. Now, it's very important for us to talk about context, because in this approach, and actually in current approaches and methods, we cannot teach English in isolated ways. We need contents, topics, something to talk about, because in English, we teach to speak and read, but we need topics about which students can develop understanding so that they work on their English actively. Contexts are also very important, and here we need to refer to the Common European Framework, because it explicitly proposes 4 macro contexts in which not only students, but also human beings use language to communicate and live. These macro contexts are called domains. That is what a domain is, a broad sector of social life in which social actors operate. There are 4: the educational, the public one, the personal, and the occupational. The educational refers to all of the language, not only structures but also communicative functions, that means language in use, related to school, the immediate context in which our beloved Bethlemites students live day by day. Do they have all of the language to live a daily life in English at school? Do they know how to express themselves in English to successfully cope with everything in their scholar life? This is something for us to reflect upon, and if the answer is that we need to invest more efforts on that, then it's time to act. The public domain refers to all language and language in use that is related to public life, ordinary social interaction. The language and the language in use that students need to understand social media, public services, politicians' speeches, and so on. It is less basic than the educational one, and it is also a lot broader, a lot more general. It's the language necessary to live within a society. Very important, right? Especially now that we are explicitly considering the social nuances of this approach. The personal domain is related to the language that students need to have a relationship and social practices in English. The language to express their feelings, to have friends, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, social interactions with people that they see day by day, their relatives, family members, and so on. It's everything that they need in English to perform well in their intimate and personal interactions. And last, but definitely not least, we have the occupational domain, the language that is very specific to the vocation that every student feels, the major that every learner wants to enroll, and the specific field in which every student wants to be a professional. Okay, now that we covered the 4 domains stated in the Common European Framework of Reference, we will now contrast this method with the previous one. You might be asking yourselves why. Well, The reason is that the communicative approach and the action-oriented approach are very similar. Actually, there are just a number of subtle differences between them. In fact, the action-oriented approach can be considered to be an updated version of the communicative approach. Let's see this in detail. In the communicative approach, we give relevance to language. Now, in the action-oriented approach, we give relevance to both content and language. Topics lead the teaching. They become more and more complex and challenging. In the communicative approach, we used to train students through separate skill instruction. That means that we would ask students to work on their skills one by one, while in the action-oriented approach, we ask students to integrate them and to combine them just like we would do in real life. However, if a specific skill needs training, the action-oriented approach is not against that. In the communicative approach, the learning process is oriented to each one individually. The learning process is more individualistic. In the action-oriented approach, the process is more collaborative and cooperative. Here, learning is social, group-based, and interactive. It is solidarity-oriented. In the action-oriented approach, the tendency is definitely group-centered. But in the communicative one, simulations tend to be very individual. When we were teaching students by following the communicative approach, we were teaching them to be temporary foreigners. That means people who needed to satisfy their needs, especially in tourism contexts, and then they would go away. They were temporary foreigners with temporary needs, thanks to the communicative approach. They were able to fulfill. However, we are now one step further. Giving life to the action-oriented approach in the classroom makes us conceive learners as world citizens, members of a plurilinguistic education. Does it make a difference? Definitely. Before, students were learning English to travel and to be able to meet their own communicative needs. Now, with the action-oriented approach, students are able to not only communicate, but work with each other. And this implies more than speaking and communicating. With the communicative approach, students could communicate with each other. With the action-oriented approach, students are able to work and achieve common tasks with each other. Let's have a case. When our beloved Bethlemites students start their major at a university or even working at any place, it is highly possible that their colleagues or the people that they work with don't speak the same language that they do. With the action-oriented approach and its social nuances, students develop a competence that enables them to achieve a mission with anyone, even if they don't share the same cultural origin or the same language. Why? Because in the communicative approach, students were taught to be able to talk to people. Now, in the action-oriented approach, students are taught to interact with people, work with them, and carry out common actions in another language. In the communicative approach, there was a lot of linguistic training. It doesn't mean that the action-oriented approach doesn't imply training, but it doesn't forget that learning is a social activity. We learn thanks to others and with others. We learn in a community by helping each other. Learning a language becomes way more powerful when there is real social interaction in the classroom. This also implies a shift from individual autonomy, of course in the communicative approach, to a social sense of responsibility. Now, let's see the final subtle difference between the communicative approach and the action-oriented approach. In the first one, we used to conceive 4 skills. They are represented in these icons. Take some seconds to guess. Great! Yeah! Now, in the action-oriented approach, speaking is divided into 2 different sub-skills, speaking in monologue and speaking in interaction. Somehow, throughout history, we could have probably been working a lot on speaking in monologue. Students were asked to do so many presentations, but now that we have raised awareness upon language learning, we realize that it's not the same as speaking in interaction. This is why this approach is so social and so cultural. These are dimensions that we shouldn't have ever forgotten when talking about learning, especially learning a language. We need to give students the possibility to embrace the world as big and diverse as it is, fostering in them intercultural intelligence and skills, because our beloved Bethlemites students, along with other current generations, are tomorrow's leaders. And if they are tomorrow's leaders, that means that they need to be today's global citizens, today's and tomorrow's mediators. This is why we need to refer to two very important concepts, scaffolding and feedback. How would you define them in your own words? Take some seconds to think about it. Scaffolding refers to all of the techniques and strategies that we, teachers, use to support our students in their learning process. It's like accompanying a baby when he or she is learning to walk. At first, we help him or her a lot, but then the boy or the girl just wants to walk by himself or herself. When we scaffold our beloved Bethlehemite students, we guide them to find ways by themselves to increase confidence, competence in their language performance, and also completing tasks. As to feedback, it is very important that it's specific, on time, and that students have different opportunities to apply such feedback. It is not enough for them to know what they did well and what they could have done better. It's also important for them to know when they will be able to apply the feedback that they got. Some final thoughts about the action-oriented approach are the following. Express tasks in friendly, comprehensible, but real language that reflects real-life proximity. Don't forget to include an evidence on learning, an outcome, a concrete product that students can share with each other so that students are encouraged to invest their efforts in achieving a goal. Don't forget to vary the product either. Remember to set the classroom in a way that reflects real-life communication. Classroom arrangement is vital to interaction. Last tip, but not least, always vary. When teachers become predictable, they lose engagement from their students. Vary your grouping techniques, your tools, your resources, the skills that learners are practicing, and always support their confidence in the language. Thank you so much for sticking around and learning about this very important approach. Next video, we are going to show you a very specific proposal about how to bring these action-oriented contributions into projects in the classroom.